All right, let's jump right in. Every single living thing, from a tiny bacterium to us, is built from cells, and every one of those cells has this boundary, a line that separates the inside of life from the chaos of the outside world. Today, we're taking a deep dive into that incredible boundary, the plasma membrane.
I mean, really think about that. What is it that keeps all the intricate machinery of life contained, organized, and safe? What's the one thing that truly defines a cell as a cell? It's a question that gets right to the very core of what it means to be alive.
And here's the kicker. The answer isn't some boring, static wall. Because if it were made of brick, nothing could ever get in or out. No, you got to picture it more like the bouncer at the coolest club in town. It's flexible, it's checking IDs, it decides who's on the list, and it controls the whole vibe. It's not just strong, it's smart.
So for our first stop, let's zoom in and really appreciate this thing for what it is. This isn't just a container. It's a living, dynamic border that literally defines the edge of life itself.
The bouncy castle analogy you see here is actually perfect. It's got to be flexible enough to move and bend, but strong enough to keep everything inside. And, most importantly, it's selective. It lets the good stuff, like nutrients, pass right through. It's a fantastic mental image for how this barrier works.
And the name scientists have for this is just spot on, the fluid mosaic model. Think about it. Mosaic because it's made up of all these different pieces, proteins, lipids, carbs, all fitting together. And fluid because those pieces aren't cemented in place. They can literally drift around, which, as we'll see, is absolutely critical for the cell to do its job.
Okay, so if it's a fluid mosaic, what are all those little tiles actually made of? Let's build this barrier from the ground up, starting with its single most important building block.
So meet the absolute star of the show, the phospholipid. This one molecule is the entire reason the membrane can exist, and it's all because it has this kind of split personality. One end of it absolutely loves water, and the other end is totally terrified of it.
And this split is everything. The hydrophilic, or water-loving head, is perfectly happy to hang out with the water inside and outside the cell. But the hydrophobic, or water-fearing tails, nope. They do everything they can to get away from water, tucking themselves into the middle to create this protected, oily core.
And because of that love-hate relationship with water, something incredible happens all on its own. The second you drop these molecules into water, it's like a mad scramble. The tails desperately try to hide from the water, huddling together while the heads face outwards. And just like that, boom, they spontaneously form a perfect, self-healing, two-layered sheet. No blueprint, no instructions, it's just chemistry doing its thing, and it's awesome.
But remember, it's not just an oily sheet, it is a mosaic. So now, let's meet the other players, the crucial pieces that are floating around in this sea of phospholipids.
Now, take a look at this breakdown. It's pretty wild. By mass, proteins actually make up half of the membrane. Let that sink in. The lipids make up the basic structure, sure, but it's the proteins that are doing a huge amount of the actual work.
So what are all their jobs? Well, think of it like this. The proteins are the workers. They're the transport tunnels, the communication antennas, the signal receivers. Cholesterol, that's the stabilizer. It makes sure the membrane doesn't get too runny when it's hot or too stiff when it's cold. And those carbohydrates sticking off the surface? They're basically the cell's ID tags, letting other cells know who they are and if they belong.
And here's the key thing to remember. None of this is static. All these pieces are constantly moving, drifting sideways like boats on a lake. This fluidity is essential. It lets the cell change its shape, make repairs, and move its protein workers to wherever they're needed most.
So we've built the membrane, we've met the players. Now let's talk about what this thing actually does. Because this is no passive fence. It's a smart, active gate making decisions every millisecond.
This right here is probably its most critical job. It's selectively permeable. That's a fancy way of saying the membrane is picky, really picky. It'll let small things like oxygen and water just slip right on through, no problem. But for bigger stuff or anything with an electrical charge, it's like, whoa, hold on, you need to use a designated door.
And there are basically two ways in. You've got passive transport, which is like the general admission line. No energy needed. Things just flow from high concentration to low. But then there's active transport. That's the VIP entrance. This requires the cell to spend energy, usually a molecule called ATP, to physically pump things through, often forcing them to go where they don't naturally want to go.
And its job list just keeps going.
Its proteins act like little doorbells, receiving signals from the outside world. It has special molecules that let it stick to its neighbors to build tissues. It can even wrap itself around big particles to eat them, or fuse with internal packets to spit out waste. It is a multitasking machine.
Okay, so we've covered what it is and what it does. But let's zoom out and talk about the big picture. Why is this tiny, oily layer so incredibly important for our health and, well, for all of life?
First off, just get your head around the scale here. We are talking about a structure that's just a few billionths of a meter thick. This unbelievably thin, fragile-looking film is all that separates life from non-life. It's mind-bogglingly powerful.
And its whole mission, its entire purpose, is to maintain something called homeostasis. That just means keeping the inside of the cell perfectly balanced, the right temperature, the right pH, the right amount of salt. The membrane is constantly working, pumping things in and out to keep that delicate internal environment just right.
And because that balance is so vital, when the membrane messes up, the results can be catastrophic. Take a disease like cystic fibrosis. That's caused by a single faulty transport protein in the membrane. It throws the cell's salt balance totally out of whack. But on the other hand, we can use this knowledge to our advantage. Many antibiotics work by specifically targeting and destroying the membranes of bacteria, killing them without hurting our own cells. So as we finish up, just think about this. This tiny, fluid, dynamic barrier is the interface between every cell in its world. It holds the keys to health, to disease, to life itself. The better we get at understanding its complex dance of proteins and lipids, the better we get at speaking its language. What could we do? What diseases could we finally conquer? It really makes you wonder, right? Learning to talk to the cell membrane could honestly change everything.